Thank you very much. Serdar Hocam, teşekkür.
Thank you, Professor Serdar. Yesterday, we started a philosophical debate. Apparently, we will be continuing the same thing. Now, I will go into details of RDOC. Professor Serdar already revealed some material which I would use, why the existing systems are not too good, are not very good. He began to tell this. This is, on one hand, a very philosophical discussion. What is a disease? When we think from this perspective, I think we can discuss it at length. For example, in tuberculosis, we have many discussions in this issue. Yes, there is a bacteria. It should enter, it's supposed to enter into the human body. But why tuberculosis was so widespread in 19th century among poor people? Now, why it's not being seen in the world except poor countries? The disease is not just an illness, is not just a physiological process, but still it should exist in nature. In the society, a part of the human beings are having non-normal experiences. If there is a joint in the nature, there are normal people and ill people, so we have to separate them from each other. So the philosophers call it true type, a type as it is in the nature. This is not something which we invented, but in psychiatry we don't have this chance. Generally we are just playing to the music which we made. We are just putting some categories and we are just using them. In psychiatry, where we are, in early 20th century, for example, is comparable to a physician in early 20th century. A patient is coughing. Is it pneumonia or heart failure? Without X-ray, it's impossible to understand. And same for us. We cannot see the symptoms of a patient. We are doing our best for diagnosing correctly, but still we don't have enough physiological knowledge. But there are also similar problems in other non-psychiatric areas of medicine. For example, pneumonia is different from non-insulin type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is very widespread. There are some transitions to normal, but it's very easy to differentiate healthy and pneumonics. If you can put just two categories and you can just differentiate them from each other. But in diabetes, there is some transition in normal and non-normal. And in psychiatry, this is very widespread. And our basic problem is, as I said, it's not easy for us to access the psychopathology directly. We are seeing what patient tells, we are seeing what we observe, but actually, it's impossible to see the pathological processes that are happening in brain. This is a kind of circular reasoning, a circular logic. We define schizophrenia as follows. Then we are beginning to look into schizophrenia. I define schizophrenia and I research schizophrenia, but it doesn't have an independent criteria. I defined what schizophrenia is, so we cannot put it to the criterion of independent criteria. DSM was a kind of response to these problems, actually, especially during transition from DSM 2 to 3. There was a philosophical dislocation. Yes, we said, we think this and that, but specialists say that I know schizophrenics, they are like this, but another specialists say that no, they are not like this, they are like that. So they said, let's find the interrelated reliability. At least two different physicians can draw the same conclusions from the same symptoms. Maybe it's not a philosophically deep conclusion, but still we can find some common conclusions. And while we were thinking to DSM-3, we decided to change the diagnostic system. But Steve Hyman wrote in 2010, when we focus on reliability, we jeopardize the scientific understanding. And in DSM-4, we have the same problem, even now in DSM-5. The validity decreases. Yes, okay, we don't know what this or that disease is, but at least let's find an environment where everybody can speak the same language. We focus on reliability, but this time we live we stop thinking about what a disease is, what the diseases are. Then we are going backwards. Steve Hyman, a psychiatrist in Harvard, one of our professors, and also a philosopher, he called them epistemic blinders. They are epistemic blinders, like horses, blinders of the horses. We are not just interested in knowledge. We don't see what this disease is. We just have some are blind. That's okay. 2 criteria out of 3 criteria is valid, so this is schizophrenic, and etc. These problems, of course, pose problems in categorical classification. As Professor Serdar already stated, there are some interesting issues. On one hand, we have to be over-specific. We have to put NOS diagnosis. Any patient entering into a clinic, in 30% we have NOS diagnosis. We don't know actually, apparently, what is it. Just physicians said that I don't know, it's psychosis, but I don't know what kind of a psychosis is. It's a mood disorder, but what kind of a mood disorder? No idea, they say. So we are trying to put them into 2 specific categories. And also there is comorbidity. Psychos NOS plus mood order NOS plus substance use. It's so widespread. In American clinics, it's seen that an average psychiatric patient has 2 or 3 diseases. We can say that he has a heart problem and renal problem, but each and every patient entering into a clinic, if they have independent diseases, it's not reasonable enough. We are diagnosing more than one, but actually there are some underlying conditions. Why bipolars are predisposed to substance addiction? If 100 people take some marijuana, 1 or 2 of them are becoming addicts, and if they are, apparently, they have another mental disease. It's not just a coincidence. It's not just coincidence he has a heart problem and a liver problem. No, it's not like this. And while we are trying to fix things, the things begin to go worse. Reliability is worse in DSM-5. Yes, DSM-4 had some problems, but since we didn't approach from a philosophically correct perspective, we weren't interested in validity, so we are just deceiving ourselves. DSM and ICD more or less same, but in America, DSM, because of commercial reasons, it's emphasized too much, so it really invaded the society. Not only the clinicians are using it a lot, but even the insurance companies are using it. In Canada and in States, same thing goes. For a physician can get a payment, he has to fill in a form and he has to put a DSM diagnosis. Otherwise, insurance company doesn't pay it. Everybody is using DSM. In legal processes, if there is something related to a mental illness, judges, lawyers, they are first asking DSM diagnosis. In public relations, while trying to psychiatry tell itself to society, they start according to DSM, this is like this and that. And also in the same way, it goes for research and new treatments. DSM is problematic, but still it infiltrated to the whole society. And on the other hand, Tom Whistle and his friends, the NIMH administrators, are asking for coming to a different point than DSM. Just a cough example which I gave. If there's a chest pain or chest suppression, or if there is an inflammation, what is the reason for this? If this question is asked, we don't diagnose according to the temperature, body temperature, or the severity of the symptom. No, we look at the real reasons and then we diagnose. That's why they put forward the RDOC idea. They wanted to transform the diagnosis. They want to change it, and they want to do it based on biology, completely independent from DSM criteria. Can we do it by using biology? Of course, to do this, we need to know the cognitive processes. We have to understand genetics and the brain circuits. DSM people were actually saying same things. When DSM-4 was being written, they were saying that in neurosciences we are not good, but while neuroscience goes forward, we have to use it. In the future, diagnosis should be brain-based. Insel said that we shouldn't wait, we should start from now. But DSM guys say that no, it's too early, we cannot explain many things, so we shouldn't go forward in this path. They want to transform diagnosis. They want to reform it. But RDOC is, in this point, just a research framework. It doesn't have a hypothesis. This is schizophrenia, this is depression. No, they don't say this. They just want to put a framework to frame the issue, actually. So RDOC is not a diagnostic system at the moment. If a physician fills in a form and he cannot say that according to RDOC this is this disease. No, it's an investment for the future. But while they are investing to the future, they are putting the frame about collecting the genetic imaging, etc. Do this according to RDOC, they say. So the researchers, if they want to use RDOC, for example, if they will do a clinical trial, for example, I gave antidepressants to 100 depressive patients and I have a 51% improvement. But if he uses a DSM-based diagnosis, according to RDOC framework, this is a bit archaic, a bit out of fashion. So we have to measure how depressed the patient is. Maybe you will be using G brain waves, or you will look at the questionnaires, or in other way. But you need to have something measured. And instead of just looking at some criteria and saying that, yes, this is major depressive disorder, this should be measurable according to RDOC. In this way, we cannot say that no, this patient is not depressive, no, he is depressive, etc. Look, just give the questionnaire to the same patient and look the results. So we are trying to push psychiatry towards the precision medicine targets by measuring individually the patients and to understand the biological disorders in that patient. It's not a radical attempt to change all the diagnosis from now on. It's just a rethinking of research by using biology while trying to understand psychiatry. Let's invest to the future. We will see the results. Same goes for the genetical and brain researches. While doing this, RDOC guys are attaching a great importance to cognition and neuroscience. We should understand the brain. While understanding psychopathology, of course, it's reasonable to ask what's happening in patients' mentality. Psychiatry cannot just part itself from this, but it's just the beginning of the process. Maybe in the future, in our dream, it will dictate us which tests to be implemented, which tests to be performed. If it's something related to substance abuse, then it is this and that test. If it's depression, the other tests, etc. But it will not be a diagnosis based on the communication between patient and doctor. It will be diagnosed based on neuroscience and cognition. And this is a published article in Science. We have depressive, dysthymic, or bipolar depressive patients, but these are DSM categories. These are categories based on what patients said and what physicians saw, but there are blues, yellows, greens, which means that they are patients with different biological features, but some of them are in bipolar, some of them are in depression, some of them are in all of them. But maybe we can put them all together and we can understand what makes the yellow different from green or blue. Maybe neuroimaging, brain imaging, cognitive tests, etc. Let's measure all of them and let's put them into real categories: blues, yellows, greens, and reds. We are in that point. RDOC is here. RDOC tells us to do this. This is not diagnosis. is just a framework or framing study. But in the future, 10 or 20 years later, if we can progress in this way, if we can fix the categories by working in this way, we will have arrived to that point. And after we have arrived at that point, we will be able to select the way A or way B towards a patient which enters in our clinic. It's philosophically very clear, very attractive, but if we knew what's happening here, everybody would solve it. Okay, if we could say that inflammatory depression, cognitive depression, and just inventing genetical depression, if we would be able to say this, we would have just measured this one, but since we don't know this, we are doing like this. But they tell us to do this systematically. Everybody use this one and let's use the same skills and we'll be successful in the future. Serdar always showed this, but yeah, philosophically it's attractive, but what we will measure? There are many studies in this regard actually. First, they divided into 5 different domains. One, negative balance, fear, anxiety, and positive balance, especially rewards, and of course cognition, social processes, arousal and regulatory systems, stimulation and regulation. It's most related to circadian rhythms, night and day rhythms, sleep. So they divided all psychopathology in 5 fields. I'm sure you remember this, and that's when I first saw that, I said, where is psychosis? Where we will put psychosis? To find psychosis, you go to cognitive, you go, for example, perception, attention, logical reasoning. Only after going deeper here, you can find hallucinations and delusions. But psychosis is not very prominent in RDOC. They are trying to define psychopathology in these 5 fields: genetical, molecular, cellular-based, circuit-based, physiological behaviors, and physiological emotions, and task paradigm. The tasks which you will assign to patient. We can study each and every one of them. I will not go into details of this. Negative valence. Negative valence, I already said it, is just mostly aversive situations, which is not liked by organism. I said fear and anxiety, also threats, hazards, post-traumatic stress, frustrative non-reward, for example. It's a psychological concept. If a person is used to have rewards under a certain condition, when this reward is not given, what happens? For example, he is using drugs, but he cannot use it after a while. Or grief, loss. Negative valence systems include these psychopathological concepts, and positive valence, as you might estimate, mostly related to mania and drug use, motivation, the value of rewards, responsive stories to reward, responsiveness to reward. If you are rewarded once, is it attracting you? 100 people are using drug, but 1 or 2 of them really cannot help themselves to do it again. Maybe the people with mood disorders. Reward learning, habit learning actually, to have a habit, and drug, substance addiction, and things related to mania. In cognition, we have attention, perception, of course, memory, language use, cognitive control, working memory, etc. When you go deep in these, we have these things in cognitive, and when you go deeper, you find even maybe psychosis, but many things else. Attachment is being studied a lot in recent times. Maybe you know it better than me, especially for borderline patients. In human relations, the attachments with parents and some disorders in this attachment can cause this, and that's social communication, theory of mind, understanding oneself, understanding the others, arousal, regulatory systems, as I said, circadian rhythms, sleep and wakefulness processes. This is how they are dividing psychopathology, and the slide which I've shown you is helping us to fill in all these. Don't tell me schizophrenia, tell me about hallucination. If somebody coming from hallucination, put this into this cell, which is below cognitive and perception. But hallucination is not only schizophrenia, it's related to schizophrenia, also those who are seeing in mood disorders, in post-traumatic context, acute intoxication. Don't differentiate them. Leave it to the science. Don't allow a physician come and say that, no, this is not like this, but it's like that. Just measure it. If there is a real differentiation, you will see it. There might be hallucination and neurodegenerative disorder in a certain person, and the measurements will be different from a guy who has hallucination plus schizophrenic disorder. And that is why we are filling in RDOC matrix. Serdar Hoca showed this. We can fill in molecules, cells. Of course, we will not go into details. Negative valence, acute threat fear. Acute threat fear. What will happen if we have fear? The serotonin transporter gene, for example, is very famous, and many other genes. In molecules, we have serotonins, corticosteroid, cortisones. When we look circuits, first amygdala, and then the others follow. There are two things which is not pronounced a lot in RDOC. They have been criticized. When you go into the internet site of RDOC, they are covering it widely. One is developmental processes. They are putting psychopathology in a matrix. They ask us measuring everything, but there was no idea where it comes from and where it goes to. Nowadays, they began to emphasize this. They say that this is implicit in RDOC framework. We didn't elaborate on them at length, but everybody, of course, should look at developmental processes. For example, in adolescence, brain maturation, synaptic pruning the synapses. If you are interested in this, of course, this might be a part of RDOC matrices, they say. So developmental processes have been overlooked to a certain extent. Now they are coming back. Of course, the environmental communication with environment, and especially maladaptive interaction with environment. They are not also emphasizing this either. Of course, there are some processes, for example, sleep deprivation because of physical environment. A bipolar patient who was sleepless, or a person who lived in under stress conditions having PTSD. Also, the interaction with environment might be a byway communication. The inputs from environment will have an effect on humans, and the humans' behaviors will have an effect on environment. Cognition and neuroscience circuits. They are really focusing on this. They want to integrate this. But RDOC is not a genetical program. Let's take blood samples from everybody. Let's look at genetics, and we will find the diagnosis. No. On the contrary, it's a neuroscientific program. Genetic is not emphasized a lot, we can say that. They are mostly interested in how brain waves have an effect on cognition. Also, they are not interested in all human behaviors. For example, there are thermoregulation brain systems, but they are not looking at thermoregulation systems. Also, the reproductive behavior is not closely included. The number of constructs are few. Perception, for example, visual, auditory, and other sensory modalities. They are not just writing them in details. They just call it perception. You just look at perception as you know it. They didn't detail or elaborate on everything to the end. What I say in this slide, there is a relation from one to many and from many to one relationship. If there is a disorder in a brain, you can see few diseases. For example, orbitofrontal cortex disorders can have results in mood disorders, anxiety, OCD, even drug addiction and schizophrenia, which means that we cannot say that this region of brain is related to one psychopathology disease. And also in the same way, in one region of brain, we can have inputs from the more than one disease. For example, in depression, we can see monoamine system impact. We cannot see a one-to-one correspondence which can be mapped, and we cannot say that we can go from here to here and from there to there. We have to look more widely to brain, and we should think more complex related to the relationship of processes, brain processes in psychopathology. RDOC is not a system which is telling a lot about this. Of course, in the future we should have this. I told the rationale here. While taking patients to a study, don't take them according to DSM, but take them according to a NEEM measurement. For example, look emotion regulation test, and if there is an emotion regulation disorder, take them all. Or look at the activation and amygdala, take them according to this. If you do this, of course, according to this rationale of RDOC, we will have understood the mechanism better. For example, if you took patients according to amygdala activation, there will be some anxiety disorders, but there will be some of them. But also, there might be some healthy individuals having anxiety, or they might be having other diseases, schizophrenia, but also anxiety. To bring them all together and to measure them all together would be more meaningful, according to RDOC rationale. I can say that we are progressing. This is a genetical study. But what they are measuring in genetics is not the genetics of schizophrenia, of drug addiction, but it is the genetics of positive balance. For example, they are doing reward sensitivity with, or craving. The patients who are craving drug substance, they are bringing together all these patients, and they are bringing together genetics. And they say that they have found very serious genetical findings. We do not have to necessarily stick to DSM diagnosis to make genetical research. Internet website is very easy to find. In NIMH website, you will easily find it. What they told it is to say that NIMH is reorienting its face away from DSM towards RDOC, but it doesn't mean that DSM categories is prohibited. No, DSM is so widespread that we cannot stay away from DSM, at least for American system. But RDOC is something looking to the future, and NIMH wants to support RDOC studies. They want them to orient this process. Everybody has different opinions about RDOC. I'm not an RDOC Omigo, but I'm not against it either. It's a good idea. I'm sure we will have some progress from it. For example, with Mateo Kashaman, we wrote an article, and what we have said is this. Of course, in cognition, we have these thoughts. In depression, in schizophrenia, in neurodegenerative, in substance abuses, we have always cognitive problems. We cannot say that they are all unrelated, completely unrelated individual or isolated processes. They might have some overlapping places. So we have to look from this perspective instead. I don't remember the page number, but if you look at this, after the categorization of diagnosis, there's a cognitive impairment scale. You can use that scale, for example. Gradually, these concepts are entering into diagnostic system. But in the future, there is not a longitudinal approach in RDOC. We don't have a developmental or temporal dimension, but there are some people who are approaching very negative. For example, Danny Weinberger, a prominent schizophrenia researcher, he says, yeah, it's a good idea not to take the depressive patients, but measure something. But you should think a lot about what you are measuring. For example, about negative symptoms. Overestimating the cost or effect involved in attaining an outcome. You have a target, you want to get there, but effort is too much for us. Do you want to find a job? Yes, he says, but why you don't find a job? He says that just I don't like it, I don't feel like it. We call them negative symptoms. Weinberger says that, but the same thing goes for example, lazy people. Why you are not drinking water? Because I didn't feel like it. I'm thirsty, but I just didn't go to drink it. This is different from schizophrenia. But if we use RDOC system, we will develop these measurements, and we will give the same measurements to everybody, and we will put the lazy guys and schizophrenic people into the same category. He doesn't say that what comes out from RDOC is wrong. He says that we should think well what we will measure and what we will see. the temporal dimension of time. We don't have it RDOC, as it is just measuring everything in one cross section and you solved everything. But we should understand where it comes from and where it's going. In everywhere, in psychopathology, brain disorders, physiology, all of them. To wrap up, RDOC was proposed as a response to a very serious crisis. It's not just an unmeaningful or meaningless effort. It's here to stay, but it's not a diagnostic framework yet. It's a framework. What's important is how to fill in the RDOC. If it will be done in a wrong way, it might fail just like DSM. But if we can do right works, neurogenetical works, especially for brain development, it can be more successful. Thank you very much.